The morning sun spilled through the blinds of a quiet Chicago apartment, painting golden stripes across the living room floor. 10-year-old Kofi sat cross-legged on the rug, his sketchbook open, pencil moving with careful focus. He was drawing a jetliner again, this one with wings that curved like seagulls and a tail painted in soft silver. Airplanes had always fascinated him, not just because they flew, but because they carried people to places they'd never been, to people they missed. Today he was going to one of those places himself. His mom, Nia, moved through the kitchen, packing snacks into a small carry-on. She hummed softly, a tune Kofi recognized from childhood lullabies. But there was a tightness around her eyes, the kind that came from holding back big feelings. They were flying to Atlanta to see family they hadn't visited in over 2 years. It wasn't just a trip. It was a reunion long overdue, stitched together with phone calls and video chats that never quite filled the silence. Kofi closed his sketchbook and stood, tucking it under his arm like a shield. "Do you think Auntie Lila will still make those banana pancakes?" he asked, voice hopeful. Nia smiled, turning to him with a look that said she was glad he was excited. "If she knows you're coming." "Absolutely," he grinned. That was enough. They took the train to O'Hare. Kofi pressed against the window the whole way, watching the city blur into suburbs, then highways, then airport signs. At the terminal, everything felt bigger. The ceilings, the voices, the rolling suitcases. But Nia held his hand calm and steady, and that made it okay. At the check-in counter, the agent's eyes lit up slightly when she saw their names. "Thorn party?" she asked, glancing at her screen. Nia gave a small nod. The woman tapped a few keys, then handed them 2 boarding passes with a polite smile. "First class, gate B14, have a wonderful flight." Kofi blinked. "First class? But we always sit in the back." Nia squeezed his shoulder. "Your dad wanted us to be comfortable." Kofi didn't question it. His dad, Malik, was often busy. Meetings, calls, late nights. But he always found ways to show he cared, even from a distance. Kofi didn't know the full scope of what his father did for work. All he knew was that Malik sometimes wore a sharp suit, sometimes a pilot's cap as a joke, and always kissed him goodnight when he could. They passed through security without a hitch. Kofi kept his sketchbook close, nervous it might get damaged, but the TSA agent just smiled and waved him through. In the lounge, soft chairs and quiet music made the chaos of the airport fade away. Nia sipped tea while Kofi sketched the people around him. An older man reading a newspaper, a little girl chasing bubbles from a toy, a flight attendant adjusting her scarf in the mirror. He liked capturing small moments, the kind most people missed. Boarding began early. As they walked down the jet bridge, Kofi's heart beat a little faster. The plane was sleek, white with a thin blue stripe running along its side and a subtle silver emblem near the tail, 2 wings cradling a sun. He'd seen that logo before on his dad's coffee mug on a keychain in the car. He never thought much of it. Inside, the cabin smelled clean like linen and citrus. A flight attendant greeted them warmly. "Welcome aboard Horizon Skies," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "Right this way." Their seats were wide and plush, with extra legroom and a screen built into the armrest. Kofi ran his fingers over the fabric, amazed. He'd never sat up front before. It felt like being in a different world. As passengers filed in behind them, another flight attendant appeared, taller, with sharp features and a stiff posture. His name tag read Derek. He moved quickly, checking seatbelts, stowing bags, his eyes scanning the cabin like he was counting problems instead of people. He barely glanced at Kofi and Nia as he passed. The plane pushed back from the gate right on time. The captain's voice came over the speaker, calm, reassuring, and Kofi leaned toward the window, watching the ground fall away. Chicago shrank beneath them, roads turning into threads, buildings into toys. He opened his sketchbook again, pencil gliding across the page as he tried to capture the curve of the wing against the sky. Everything was peaceful. Until it wasn't. About 20 minutes into the flight, the plane hit a patch of rough air. The seatbelt sign dinged on. Overhead bins rattled. A drink cart near the front wobbled, and a glass of orange juice tipped over, spilling onto the aisle floor and splashing near Kofi's seat. Instinctively, he reached out to steady the cart before it rolled further. His hand brushed Derek's arm. "Hey," Derek snapped, jerking away like he'd been burned. "Keep your hands to yourself." Kofi pulled back fast, startled. "I was just Just what? Trying to grab something that's not yours? Derek's voice was sharp, cutting through the low hum of the engines. A few nearby passengers turned to look. Nia placed a gentle hand on Kofi's knee. He was trying to help, she said evenly. Derek didn't look at her. Kids shouldn't be touching service equipment. It's a safety rule. It spilled, Kofi said quietly. I didn't want it to make a mess. Derek's jaw tightened. He grabbed a towel from the cart and wiped the floor with quick, angry strokes. Next time, ask. Don't touch, Kofi nodded, eyes down. He didn't understand why the man was so upset. He'd only wanted to help. A few minutes passed. The turbulence eased. Kofi stayed quiet, sketching again, though his lines were shaky now. He glanced at his wrist where Derek had brushed against him, and noticed a faint red mark. It stung a little, but he didn't say anything. He didn't want to cause more trouble. Then softly he asked, Could I have a napkin? My sleeve got a little wet. Derek turned. His eyes narrowed. You already caused enough disruption. I didn't mean to, Kofi whispered. Something in Derek snapped. Maybe it was the long shift. Maybe it was the argument he'd had with his sister that morning. Maybe it was just a bad day piling on top of a bad week. Whatever it was, he reached out, not to hand a napkin, but to swat Kofi's wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to sting and leave a clear red line. Stay in your seat, and keep your hands where I can see them. The cabin went still. Nia gasped. Did you just... I told him to stop interfering, Derek said, voice rising slightly. He needs to learn boundaries. Kofi didn't cry. He just stared at his wrist, confused and hurt. He'd never been hit by a stranger before. It didn't make sense. He hadn't done anything wrong. Nia's voice was low but firm. You do not touch my child, ever. Derek crossed his arms. He was being disruptive. He's 10 years old. He reached for a falling glass. Before Derek could respond, a woman in the next row leaned forward. I saw what happened, she said calmly. The boy was trying to help. You overreacted, Derek flushed. This is a safety-sensitive environment. I have protocols to follow. Protocols don't include hitting children, the woman replied. Nia stood up slightly, still holding Kofi's hand. I'd like to speak with your supervisor. Derek hesitated. The lead attendant is busy with pre-landing checks. Then I'll speak with the captain after we land, Nia said. But I'm filing a formal complaint. Today. Derek's eyes flickered with something. Panic, maybe, or regret. But he said nothing. He turned and walked toward the galley, avoiding everyone's gaze. Kofi finally looked up at his mom. His voice was small. Was it my fault? Nia cupped his face. No, baby. Not even a little. You were kind. That's never wrong. He nodded, but the hurt stayed in his eyes. Behind them, a retired schoolteacher named Evelyn quietly pulled out her phone. She didn't film the slap. She'd missed that moment. But she did capture the tense exchange that followed, just in case. She'd seen too many kids dismissed. Too many adults hide behind authority. If something needed to be said later, she'd have proof. Up front, Derek tried to focus on his duties, but his hands trembled slightly as he restocked the cart. He knew he'd crossed a line. He told himself it was just a tap, just discipline, but deep down he knew better. And the worst part? He couldn't take it back. Meanwhile, Kofi opened his sketchbook again. This time he didn't draw the plane. He drew a boy sitting by a window looking out at the clouds with a small red mark on his wrist. Underneath he wrote 2 words, not fair. The plane continued its journey south, the sky clear now, the engines humming steadily. But inside, something had shifted. A quiet moment of kindness had been met with anger, and now ripples were spreading. Through a mother's resolve, a stranger's courage, and a boy's silent question. Why? No one knew it yet, but that question was about to travel all the way to the top. Because sometimes the people who seem farthest away are the ones who feel the closest when it matters most. And sometimes a single moment, small, painful, unjust, can change everything. The rest of the flight passed in a heavy silence. Kofi stayed by the window, sketchbook open but untouched, his fingers tracing the red mark on his wrist like it might vanish if he rubbed it enough. Nia kept one hand on his shoulder, her other gripping the armrest just a little too tightly. She wasn't angry, not in the loud, shouting way, but in the quiet, simmering kind that meant she'd already made up her mind about what came next. Around them, the cabin hummed with the usual sounds of cruising altitude, soft chatter, the clink of ice in cups, the occasional cough. But something had shifted. Passengers who'd barely noticed the boy before now glanced his way with concern. The woman who'd spoken up, Evelyn, leaned over during drink service and quietly handed Nia a sealed pack of antibacterial wipes and a small tube of aloe gel. "For his wrist," she murmured. No child should leave a flight feeling smaller than when they boarded. Nia accepted it with a grateful nod. "Thank you," Evelyn gave a small smile. "I've been teaching kids for 40 years. I know the difference between mischief and kindness. What that man did, it wasn't right." Nia didn't respond right away. She gently dabbed the aloe on Kofi's skin. He flinched slightly but didn't pull away. "It's okay, Mama," he whispered, though his voice wavered. "It's not okay," she said softly. "And we're not going to pretend it is." Back in the galley, Derek tried to busy himself with inventory sheets, but his mind kept circling back to the look on the boy's face. Confused, hurt, not even angry. That was the worst part. The kid hadn't yelled or cried. He'd just folded in on himself. And now, every time Derek walked past their row, he felt eyes on him. Not hostile, just watchful. Like he'd broken an unspoken rule everyone else still honored. He told himself it was just a bad moment. A lapse, he'd apologize later. Maybe offer a voucher, smooth things over. Airlines did that all the time. Customer service recovery, they called it. But deep down, a cold knot formed in his stomach, because he knew this wasn't about spilled juice or protocol. It was about power, and he'd used it wrong. Meanwhile, miles away in Atlanta, Malik Thorne stood in a sunlit conference room overlooking the treetops of Buckhead. He was wrapping up a meeting about Horizon Sky's new fleet of hybrid electric regional jets, part of his long-term plan to make air travel cleaner, quieter, more human. Charts and renderings covered the walls. His team was energized, proud. But then his phone buzzed. It was Nia, not a text, a call. And she never called during flights. He excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "Hey," he said, voice warm. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. Then quietly, "We need you." Those 3 words hit him like a gust of wind. He knew that tone. It wasn't panic, it was steel wrapped in calm. Something had happened. "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately. "No, but Kofi..." Someone touched him. In a way they shouldn't have. Malik's breath caught. "On the plane?" "Yes, a flight attendant." He slapped his wrist. Hard enough to leave a mark. Malik didn't yell. Didn't curse. But the air around him seemed to still. "What's the flight number?" 217, we land in 40 minutes. I'll be there." He ended the call and walked back into the conference room. "Meeting's over," he said. "Reschedule everything for tomorrow." Then he turned to his assistant. "Get me on the next shuttle to Atlanta. Doesn't matter if it's full. Make it happen." Within 20 minutes, he was in a car heading to the private terminal. His mind raced, not with rage, but with a sharp, focused clarity. He'd built Horizon Skies on a simple belief. Flying should feel safe, dignified, and kind. Not just for executives and celebrities, but for everyone, especially kids who looked out the window and dreamed of clouds. If someone on his team had violated that trust, it wouldn't be swept under the rug. Not ever. Back on the plane, the captain announced their descent into Atlanta. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, collecting trash, checking seatbelts. Derek avoided row 4A like it was a storm cloud. When he passed, Kofi didn't look up. But Nia met his eyes and held them just long enough to make him look away. As the wheels touched down, a collective sigh of relief rippled through the cabin. But for Nia and Kofi, the journey wasn't over. They stayed seated while others filed out, waiting until the aisle cleared. Evelyn paused by their row. "If you need a witness," she said gently, "I'm happy to help." Nia touched her arm. "Thank you. That means a lot." Outside, the Georgia air was thick with late summer warmth. Palm trees swayed near the terminal. But Kofi barely noticed. He walked close to his mom, sketchbook pressed to his chest like armor. And then, at the end of the jet bridge, standing just beyond the gate door, was Malik. He wasn't in a suit. Just dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, and the same worn leather watch he'd had since Kofi was born. No entourage. No security. Just a father who'd dropped everything because his son needed him. Kofi's eyes widened. "Dad?" Malik knelt right there on the tiled floor, opening his arms. Kofi ran into them without hesitation. For a long moment, Malik just held him. One hand cradling the back of his head, the other rubbing slow circles on his back. Then gently he pulled back and looked at his son's face. "Hey, buddy," he said, voice rough with emotion. "You okay?" Kofi nodded, but his eyes flickered toward his wrist. Malik saw it instantly, the faint red line already fading but still visible. His expression didn't change, but something deep inside him shifted, like a compass needle finding true north. He kissed Kofi's forehead. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not one single thing." Then he stood and turned to Nia. Their eyes met, and in that look past everything words couldn't say: worry, love, resolve. Inside the terminal, Derek emerged with the rest of the crew, rolling his carry-on behind him. He spotted Malik immediately. At first he didn't connect the dots, just another passenger waiting for family. But then he saw the way Malik held Kofi's hand, the way Nia stood close, the quiet intensity in their posture. And then he saw the Horizon Skies pin on Malik's sweater, a small, discreet emblem only employees would recognize. His stomach dropped. Malik didn't approach him right away. He waited until the crew reached the employee exit. Then he stepped forward, calm and composed. "Derek Langley?" Derek froze. "Yes?" "I'm Malik Thorne. I'd like to speak with you now." Recognition hit like a wave. Derek's face went pale. "Mr. Thorne, I didn't know." "That's not what concerns me," Malik said evenly. "What concerns me is what happened to my son on your flight." Derek stammered. It was a misunderstanding. He reached for the cart during turbulence. "I was just what?" Malik interrupted, voice still quiet but firm. "I just enforcing safety. Or just taking out a bad day on a 10-year-old? Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Malik didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "Come with me." He led Derek, not to a public area, not to a shouting match, but to a small private office near the crew lounge. Inside it was quiet, just the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of arriving flights. Malik closed the door. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. And Derek did. He admitted he'd been stressed, that he'd misread the situation, that yes, he'd struck the boy's wrist. But it wasn't violent, he insisted. It was just a tap, to get his attention. Malik leaned forward. "Do you have kids?" Derek shook his head. "Then let me tell you something. A child doesn't measure force the way an adult does. To him, your tap felt like punishment for being helpful. That mark on his wrist? It's not just skin. It's trust. And you broke it." Derek looked down. "I didn't mean to." "Intent doesn't erase impact," Malik said gently. "You represent this airline. Every time you wear that uniform, you're promising passengers, especially the smallest ones, that they'll be treated with care. Today you failed that promise." Derek swallowed hard. "What happens now?" Malik stood. "HR will contact you within the hour. You're suspended pending a full investigation. Passenger statements, crew logs, any video, all of it will be reviewed. If the findings confirm what I've heard, your employment with Horizon Skies will end." Derek's shoulders slumped. He didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes wet. Malik paused at the door. "I hope you learn from this. Not just as an employee, but as a person." Outside, Nia and Kofi waited near a quiet bench under a skylight. Kofi was sketching again. This time, his dad's face, the lines around his eyes, the way his hands looked when they held you like you mattered. Malik sat beside him. "What are you drawing?" "My hero," Kofi said simply. Malik's throat tightened. He ruffled his son's hair. "You're my hero, kiddo. For staying kind, even when someone wasn't." They didn't go to baggage claim right away. Instead, they sat there in the warm Atlanta light talking softly. About the flight, about the sketchbook, about Auntie Lila's banana pancakes. The hurt was still there, but it was being wrapped in something stronger. Safety, love, the quiet certainty that someone had your back. Later that night, after Kofi was asleep in his old room at Nia's sister's house, Malik sat on the porch with a cup of tea. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Horizon Skies head of operations. "We need to talk tomorrow. About training, about accountability, about making sure no child ever feels small on our planes again." He hit send, then looked up at the stars. Somewhere above, another Horizon Skies flight was gliding through the night, carrying people home. And from that moment on, he vowed, every one of them, especially the quiet ones with sketchbooks and kind hearts, would be treated like they belonged. Because they did. and that was non-negotiable. The next morning in Atlanta, sunlight poured through the kitchen windows of Nia's sister's house, filling the room with the smell of cinnamon and coffee. Kofi sat at the table, flipping through his sketchbook. He'd added a new page overnight, a drawing of his dad kneeling at the airport, arms open, with the words, "My safe place," written in small, careful letters at the bottom. He didn't talk much about what happened on the plane, but he kept glancing at his wrist as if checking to see if the red mark had finally disappeared. It hadn't, not completely, but it was fading, like a memory learning to soften. Nia watched him from the stove, stirring pancake batter. She hadn't slept much. Her mind kept replaying the moment Derek's hand came down, the way Kofi had shrunk into himself. She'd wanted to scream, to demand answers right then and there, but she'd stayed calm for Kofi. Now, though, the quiet anger had settled into something steadier, purpose. She knew Malik wouldn't let this go, and she was glad. Across town, Malik sat in a conference room at Horizon Sky's regional headquarters. The blinds were open, letting in the morning light, but the mood inside was serious. Around the table sat the airline's head of operations, the chief of in-flight services, and the head of human resources. No one had brought coffee. No one was smiling. Malik placed a printed photo on the table, the one Evelyn had discreetly taken after the incident. It showed Kofi looking down, hand near his wrist, Nia's protective arm around him, and Derek standing stiffly nearby, arms crossed. "This," Malik said, "is what happens when we forget who we serve." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew who Kofi was, and they all understood the weight of what that meant. Not because he was the CEO's son, but because if this had happened to any child, it would have been just as wrong. "We've reviewed the preliminary statements," the HR director said quietly. 3 passengers confirmed the boy reached for the cart to steady it. 2 said the attendant's reaction was disproportionate. Unrecorded part of the exchange. Malik nodded. "And Derek?" "He admitted to making physical contact," the in-flight chief said, eyes down. "He claims it was a corrective tap, but it's clear it crossed a line." Malik leaned back. "I didn't build this airline to move metal through the sky. I built it to move people, with dignity, especially the ones who can't speak up for themselves." He paused. "Effective immediately, I want every frontline staff member retrained on de-escalation, child interaction protocols, and implicit bias. Not next quarter, not next month, next week." There was a beat of silence. Then the operations head spoke. "That's a massive undertaking. We have over 2,000 cabin crew. Then we start today," Malik said. "Bring in child psychologists. Partner with educators. If we're going to wear this uniform, we need to understand that kindness isn't optional, it's part of the job." He didn't stop there. By noon, an internal memo went out to all Horizon Sky's employees. It didn't name names or share details, but it was clear. An incident involving a child passenger has revealed gaps in our training and response. Moving forward, Horizon Skies will implement mandatory empathy and safety workshops for all customer-facing staff. Our promise isn't just to get you there, it's to treat you like you matter every mile of the way. Meanwhile, back at the house, Kofi was helping his aunt set the table for lunch. His cousin, a bubbly 12-year-old named Zuri, plopped down beside him. "Mom said you flew first class." "Was it fancy?" Kofi shrugged. "It was nice, but something bad happened." Zuri's smile faded. "What?" He hesitated, then showed her his wrist. "A man on the plane got mad at me for no reason. He hit me." Zuri's eyes widened. "That's not fair." "I know," Kofi said. "But my dad fixed it." Zuri thought for a moment. Then she grabbed a marker from the counter and carefully drew a tiny airplane over the fading red mark. "Now it's a badge," she said proudly. "Like you survived turbulence." Kofi laughed, the first real laugh since the flight. "Thanks." Later that afternoon, Nia received a call from Horizon Sky's customer care line. It wasn't a generic apology. It was a direct message from the lead in-flight supervisor, offering a formal apology, a full refund, and an invitation to speak with the training team about how to better protect young passengers. Nia accepted, but only if Kofi's experience could help shape real change. "Don't just say sorry," she told them. "Do better." That same day, Evelyn, the retired teacher, received a polite email from the airline's ethics office. They'd reviewed her footage and statement. They thanked her for her courage and asked if she'd be willing to join an advisory panel for the new child passenger initiative. She said yes without hesitation. Back in Chicago, Derek sat alone in his apartment, blinds drawn. His phone had buzzed all morning, texts from coworkers, calls from his union rep. He'd been suspended without pay. An investigation was underway. He kept replaying the flight in his head, wishing he'd taken a breath, walked away, asked for help. Instead, he'd let frustration win. Now he wasn't just losing a job, he was losing the respect of people he'd worked beside for years. He thought about calling Nia to apologize. But what would he even say? Sorry I hurt your son? Words felt too small now. So he stayed quiet, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd ever earn back the trust he'd thrown away in one thoughtless second. That evening, Malik video called Nia. Kofi was in the background, showing Zuri how to draw wings with motion lines. He's doing okay, Nia said softly. He's stronger than I was at his age, Malik replied. I would have cried. He did cry, Nia admitted. Later, when he thought I wasn't looking. But then he drew that picture of you, like you were his shield. Malik's voice cracked just slightly. I wish I'd been there. You were, she said. The moment you showed up, that's what he'll remember. They talked for a while about the training overhaul, about reaching out to other families who'd filed similar complaints in the past, about creating a feedback system where kids could safely report uncomfortable moments mid-flight. Malik wasn't just reacting, he was rebuilding. The next morning, Kofi woke up early. He walked out to the backyard, sketchbook in hand, and sat under the old oak tree. The air was cool, birds singing in the branches. He opened to a fresh page and began to draw. Not an airplane this time, but a flight attendant. Only this one was smiling, handing a child a blanket, kneeling to their eye level. Underneath, he wrote, "This is how it should be." Inside, Nia watched him through the window. She felt a lump in her throat. Her son hadn't let bitterness take root. Instead, he was imagining a better way. That was the kind of heart she'd tried to raise. By midweek, news of the internal changes at Horizon Skies began to ripple through the industry. Not as a scandal, but as a quiet shift. Other airlines took notice. A few even reached out, asking how they could adopt similar training. Malik didn't gloat. He shared everything. Curriculum outlines, trainer contacts, even the feedback forms they were testing with kids as young as 6. One afternoon, Kofi asked his dad a question that caught him off guard. Does that mean you own the plane I was on? Malik paused. Yeah, buddy. I do, Kofi frowned. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to love flying for what it is, not because of who I am, Malik said. Airplanes should feel magical to everyone, not just the people who build them. Kofi thought about that. Then he grinned. So, does that mean I can fly first class anytime? Malik laughed. Only if you promise to keep drawing. The world needs more people who notice the quiet moments. That night, as fireflies blinked in the Georgia dusk, Kofi added one more sketch to his book. A boy and his dad, sitting side by side on a plane, looking out the window at the stars. No red marks, no fear. Just two people flying together, safe in the sky, and far above them a Horizon Skies jet cut through the clouds, its cabin lights glowing like tiny promises, its crew trained not just to serve, but to see. To really see the people they carried. Because sometimes the smallest passenger holds the biggest lesson. And this time the airline was listening. Weeks passed, and Atlanta settled into the gentle rhythm of early fall. Cooler mornings, golden afternoons, and the kind of quiet evenings that made you want to sit on the porch with a warm drink and no plans. Kofi had mostly stopped checking his wrist. The red mark was gone now, replaced by smooth skin and a memory that no longer stung quite so much. He'd filled 3 more pages of his sketchbook since the flight. Drawings of his cousins playing soccer, Auntie Lila flipping pancakes, and even a careful portrait of Evelyn, the woman who'd stood up for him without knowing his name. He didn't talk about the incident often, but when he did, it wasn't with anger. It was more like he was trying to understand how someone could be so unkind in a place that was supposed to feel safe. Why do people forget kids have feelings too? He asked his dad one evening as they walked through a local park. Malik didn't give a polished answer. He just said, sometimes people carry heavy things they don't know how to put down. That doesn't make it okay, but it helps explain why they act the way they do. Kofi nodded like that made sense. Then he pointed to a flock of geese flying overhead in perfect formation. Do you think they ever argue about who leads? Malik smiled. Probably. But they figure it out, because the journey matters more than who's in front. Back in Chicago, Derek had been officially let go from Horizon Skies. The decision wasn't made in anger. It was made after hours of review, interviews, and consultation with child safety experts. The airline offered him a severance package and a referral to a counseling program focused on workplace stress and emotional regulation. He didn't respond right away. Pride kept him silent for days. But eventually he called the number. Not because he wanted his job back, he knew that ship had sailed, but because he didn't want to be that person again. He started attending sessions twice a week. At first he just listened. But slowly he began to speak. About the pressure of long shifts, the loneliness of being away from home, the way small frustrations could pile up until they exploded in the wrong direction. His counselor didn't excuse what he'd done, but she helped him see it wasn't just about one slap. It was about a system that hadn't given him the tools to handle stress with grace. And maybe, just maybe, he could learn those tools now. Meanwhile, Horizon Skies rolled out its new Care in the Cabin program. The first training session was held in Atlanta, and Malik insisted on sitting in the back. Not as the CEO, but as a student. Flight attendants from across the country gathered in a sunlit hangar-turned-classroom, some skeptical, others curious. The day began not with policy manuals, but with a panel of kids, ages 8 to 14, telling stories about flying. One girl talked about being scared of turbulence and how a kind word from a crew member calmed her down. A boy shared how he felt invisible when adults talked over him. And then quietly, a 10-year-old named Kofi stood up. He didn't mention the slap. He didn't need to. Instead, he held up his sketchbook and flipped to a page showing a flight attendant kneeling to tie a child's shoelace before takeoff. "This is what makes me feel safe," he said. "When someone sees me." The room fell silent. Some attendants wiped their eyes. Others took notes. Afterward, one veteran crew member approached Malik. "I've been doing this for 23 years, she said, voice thick. "I thought I knew how to care. But today, I realized I've been doing it my way, not theirs." That became the heart of the new training. Not just rules, but relationships. Role-playing exercises focused on listening, not correcting. Scenarios taught attendants how to de-escalate without raising their voice. And every session ended with a simple question. How would you want your child treated? Back home, Naya watched Kofi grow more confident. He started speaking up in class, volunteering to read aloud, even joining the school's art club. His teacher mentioned how he'd helped a new student feel welcome by drawing them a welcome card with a tiny airplane in the corner. "He's got a quiet kind of courage," she told Nia. One Saturday morning, a package arrived at the house. It wasn't addressed to Nia or her sister. It was for Kofi. Inside was a custom sketchbook with a soft navy cover and a silver wing embossed on the front. Tucked in the first page was a note, "For the boy who sees the sky differently. Keep drawing. Horizon Skies training team." Kofi ran his fingers over the embossing, eyes wide. "Did Dad send this?" Nia shook her head. "No. This came from the people who are learning from you." He spent the rest of the day filling the first few pages, with ideas for friendlier airplane seats, quieter cabins, even a calm corner for nervous flyers. He didn't know it yet, but those sketches would later be shared with Horizon Skies' design team. Some of his ideas would even make it into the next generation of regional jets. Malik, for his part, kept his promise. He didn't use his son's story as a marketing tool. There were no press releases, no viral campaigns. The changes happened quietly, behind the scenes, in training rooms and crew briefings. But they were real. Within 2 months, customer satisfaction scores for family travel rose by 18%. More importantly, the number of reported incidents involving children dropped to 0. Then came the invitation. It arrived in Nia's email one evening, a simple message from a local aviation museum. They were launching a new exhibit called Flying with Heart, Stories from the Sky, and they wanted to include Kofi's journey as part of a display on empathy in air travel. Not the slap, not the drama, just the quiet truth that one boy's experience helped an entire airline remember its humanity. Nia showed it to Kofi. "You don't have to say yes," she said. "This is your story." He thought about it for a long time. Then he nodded. "I'll do it. But only if they show the good part too, the part where people changed." They agreed. The night before the exhibit opening, Malik flew down to Atlanta again, this time in coach, just like everyone else. He found Kofi sitting on the porch sketching the moon. "Nervous?" he asked, sitting beside him. "A little," Kofi admitted. "What if people think I'm showing off?" "You're not," Malik said. "You're showing up." "There's a difference." Kofi closed his book. "Do you think Derek will see it?" Malik was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. But if he does, I hope it reminds him that mistakes don't have to be the end of the story." The next day, the museum buzzed with visitors, families, pilots, retired crew members, even a few Horizon Skies employees in plain clothes. In the center of the exhibit stood a glass case. Inside was Kofi's original sketchbook, open to the page with the red mark and the words, "Not fair." Beside it was the new Navy book, open to a drawing of a flight attendant handing a child a pair of wings made of paper. A small plaque read, "Sometimes the smallest voice teaches the loudest lesson." Kofi stood nearby, hands in his pockets, watching people read the display. A little boy tugged his mom's sleeve. "Is that real?" "Yes," she said softly. "And it helped make flying kinder for kids like you." Kofi smiled. Later, as the crowd thinned, a man stood at the edge of the room. He didn't approach. He just looked at the sketchbook, then at Kofi, then turned and walked away. Kofi didn't see him, but Malik did. He recognized Derek's posture, the way he held his shoulders. He didn't follow. He just whispered a quiet hope into the air. "May you find your way back to kindness." That evening, as the sun set behind the museum's glass walls, Kofi added one more drawing to his new book. This one showed a plane flying through a storm, but inside the cabin, every passenger was holding a small light. At the front, a crew member passed out extra blankets, and in one window seat, a boy looked out, not with fear but with wonder, because the sky, he'd learned, wasn't just a place to travel through. It was a place to grow, and sometimes even the hardest moments could become the seeds of something better, if you let them. Months had passed since that flight, and life had settled into a new kind of normal, one stitched together with small acts of healing and quiet growth. Kofi was back in Chicago now, back in his own room with posters of clouds and constellations on the walls, back at school where his art teacher had started calling him our little sky poet. He still carried his sketchbook everywhere, but the pages no longer held just airplanes. Now they held hands. His mom's, his dad's, a flight attendant's offering a juice box with a smile, a stranger's holding open a museum door. He'd learned that kindness wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just a gesture, a glance, a moment of seeing someone when they felt invisible. One rainy afternoon, he sat at the kitchen table, finishing a drawing for a school project titled "People Who Changed My View." He'd chosen to draw Evelyn, the retired teacher from the plane, not because she'd done something grand, but because she'd done something human. She'd spoken up when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Underneath, he wrote, "She didn't know me, but she cared anyway." Nia watched him from the counter, stirring soup. "You're going to be an artist one day," she said. Kofi shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe I'll be a pilot, or a designer, or both," she smiled. "Whatever you choose, you'll make it kinder." That same week, Horizon Skies launched its first Young Flyer feedback program. Small comment cards with smiley face scales and open boxes for drawings, placed in every family seat back. Kids could share what made them feel safe, what scared them, what they wished was different. The first batch of responses came back full of crayon suns, notes about wanting more cookies, and one that simply said, "Please don't yell." "I'm trying my best." The training team framed that one. Malik read every single response. He kept a folder on his desk labeled "Voices from the Cabin," and every Friday afternoon he'd sit with his leadership team and go through them, not as data points, but as reminders. Because behind every scribble was a child who trusted them with their sky. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, addressed to Malik but with a note inside that read, "Please give this to Kofi when you think he's ready." The handwriting was careful, almost hesitant. Malik opened it alone in his office late one night. It was from Derek. He didn't ask for his job back. He didn't make excuses. He simply wrote about the months since, the counseling, the sleepless nights, the moment he finally understood that accountability wasn't punishment, but a path back to yourself. He talked about volunteering at a youth center now, helping kids with homework, learning how to listen before reacting. And then, near the end, I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't do it again. Tell your son I'm sorry, not just for the slap, but for making him doubt his own kindness. Malik folded the letter slowly. He didn't show it to Kofi right away. He waited until a quiet Sunday morning when they were building a model airplane together, glue on their finger.